Hey guys, we're back with some more whitetail content, and in today's video we're going to be talking about how to maintain your clover plot. In a previous video we talked about how to get a clover plot established, and if you haven't watched that one I'll link it above. But today we're going to talk about how to maintain your clover plot. Clover is a perennial, meaning it'll come back year after year, and if you maintain properly, these clover plots can last you years. We have a clover plot on one of our properties up north that I think it's going on its 7th season right now, and it looks just as good this season as it did its first. So if you give these clover plots a little bit of TLC every single year, they can last you a long time. Now I'm sure you can see the red flowers around me here. That is crimson clover, and that's an annual variety of clover. But we also have ladino clover, which is a perennial. And so that's what we're going to be trying to carry forward into the future. And to make sure that we have a stand of clover that can last us for years, there's a few things that we need to do. So just like when we established our clover plot, we wanted to make sure that we had the appropriate pH for the variety of clover that we were planting. That's no different going forward with maintaining your clover plot. Once you have your pH established, you probably don't need to have your soil tested every single year, but definitely every other year, just to make sure that your pH isn't getting too high, too low. You want to make sure that your pH stays right where you want it. And the reason that that's so important, again, is so that when you fertilize your clover, the clover is able to intake as much of the nutrients as possible. And that kind of brings me to what type of fertilizer that you want to be using on your clover plots. And that's really anything that doesn't have nitrogen. And so most of the stuff that you throw on your grass at home is heavy nitrogen, and that's when you look at the fertilizer bag, there's going to be 3 numbers, and that first number is nitrogen. And so for me, my soil test on this plot called for me to use 0060, so basically potash. And I had to use, I think it was 150 pounds per acre, and so that's what I did. And so just follow your soil test, but make sure that you're not using anything with nitrogen in it, because what nitrogen is going to do is that's just going to feed your grass. And that's one thing that you don't want growing in your clover plot, is too much grass. And that kind of brings me to really the second part of maintaining your clover plot, and that's addressing competition. You can call them weeds, I call them competition. It's really anything that you don't want in your clover plot that's going to be taking nutrients away from your clover. And so you've got to kind of get rid of that stuff to make sure that your clover has the best environment to survive. So there are kind of 3 main ways that you can kind of address the competition within your clover plot. The first is simply just mowing your plot. The second one would be if you want to use herbicide to treat the competition. And the third way would be using a combination of both. So we'll kind of talk about mowing first. If you mainly have broadleaf species in your plot, mowing is probably all you need to do. If you don't really have a lot of grass competition, then you probably don't need to be using much herbicide. The broadleaf weeds in your clover plot don't really respond well to mowing. So if you mow those guys a couple times, they most likely will not come back, and that's all you need to do. But if you have a lot of grasses, or I guess if you have a lot of broadleaf weeds and you really want to use herbicide, then that's the avenue that you probably would have to take. If you're someone that is not comfortable using chemicals and you just want to mow, make sure that you're setting your mower deck to no lower than 6 inches. And that's just so that you don't, when you cut the clover too low, you run the risk of stressing it out too much, and it might, you just have a greater chance that it might die. Now, if you're someone that is not going to use chemicals and you just want to mow, a good indicator on when you want to start mowing your clover plot is when you can start seeing flowers on, I would say, 50% or more of your clover. And you want to make sure that you have rain in the forecast. So those 2 things. So if you have, let's say, 50% of your clover is, you can see flowers on it, that means it's time to go, but you don't have rain in the forecast, I would wait. You don't want to cut your clover, stress it out, and then not have a rain event in the future to help the clover kind of rebound. Once you have addressed the grasses and addressed the broadleaves, all you need to do with your clover plots is mow them. It's pretty easy to maintain a clover plot. The cool thing about perennial clover and maintaining it simply by mowing is kind of just how clover works and kind of how clover responds to mowing. Anyone that has clover in their yard knows this, that once you cut clover, it kind of just starts to spread everywhere. So, and why that is when you cut the clover, it increases what's called the stolon and runner production, and that'll help really fill in your plot. So if you want to be treating your clover for grasses in your plot, you want to use something called clethodim. And you can find that online. Just type in clethodim on Google. I think company called Keystone Pest Solutions, as of shooting this video, sells it. And that is what's called a grass-specific herbicide. So it only kills grass. So if you spray it on your clover, it will not kill your clover. When you do use clethodim, you want to make sure you're using what's called a surfactant, and you mix that in with your backpack sprayer, your ATV sprayer, whatever you're using to spray. Because what that'll do is when you spray your mix of clethodim and the surfactant, when it hits the grass, it'll stick to the grass better, so you get a more consistent kill. Grass is pretty resistant, so you want to make sure that you're using the clethodim and the surfactant. Try to make sure that you're applying the herbicide when the grass is about 10 inches high or less. Once they start getting above 10 inches, the effectiveness really drops off. So if you get grasses that are over 10 inches, you'll probably have to mow the plot down, let it start growing up a little bit, and then spray it then. I don't know if you can see around me here, this is cereal rye that we planted with the clover last season, and I actually should have been in here last week or the week before cutting this, but unfortunately with life and with how much rain we've gotten, I haven't had a chance to get in here and treat this or cut it. So for the broadleaf weeds, you want to use something that's called 2,4-DB. You don't want to use 2,4-D, that will kill your clover. You want to use 2,4-DB, and the B is for Butarac, and that's the chemical that will treat your broadleaf weeds. Again, if you go to Keystone Pest Solutions, their website sells Butarac 200, I believe is what it's called, and that'll help you with your broadleaf weeds, and it spares the legumes, so alfalfa, clovers, soybeans, things like that. So the biggest things with a clover plot are make sure that you're maintaining your soil pH, you're fertilizing the clover with a non-nitrogen fertilizer, and you're treating all the competition. So if you have grasses in your plot, treat with clethodim. If you have broadleaves in your plot, you can either mow or treat with 2,4-DB, Butarac. Make sure that when you're using your clethodim, you're using a surfactant so that when you spray, it'll stick to the grasses. And sometimes with this stuff, you actually have to think outside the box. So for me, in this particular plot, I can't get a mower back here. We had way too much rain the past week. I think we had 7 inches of rain in the last week, and I just can't get a mower back here. It's too wet to spray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my weed whacker, and I'm actually going to weed whack probably 1.5 acres of cereal rye and grass. And then I'm going to wait a little bit of time, then I'm probably going to come back and treat it with the grass selective herbicide clethodim, because I am getting a little bit of grass in some areas and I want to make sure I address that right away. So going forward, that all I have to do is mow. So hopefully that makes sense. You really don't have to overcomplicate it when it comes to these clover plots. They're pretty resistant. The biggest thing you have to do is eliminate the competition and also make sure that they have the nutrients that they need to continue to thrive. If you guys have any questions on any of this, feel free to drop them in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer those as soon as I can. But we will see you guys in the next video.